fear. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God, and I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
There is no rock, there is no God like our God. No other name is worthy of all our praise. The rock of salvation that cannot be moved, He's proven Himself to be faithful and true. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. Rock of ages, let's sing it out. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, oh, Jesus is the rock. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. That's the whole song. It's really easy now. Join back and sing it with us. There is no rock, there is no rock, there is no God like our God. No other name worthy of all our praise. The rock of salvation that cannot be moved, He's proven Himself to be faithful and true. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. Rock of ages, let's sing it together. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. Rock of ages, Jesus is the rock. There is no rock, there is no God like ours. All right, let's sing it out together. Come on, kids, y'all sing out with us. Rock of ages.
It's always been you, Jesus. Jesus, nothing else matters. Nothing in this world will do. Jesus, you're the center. Everything revolves around you. Jesus, you. Jesus be.
In Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse number 7, the Apostle Paul writing to the church at Galatia. Now, Paul spent a good bit of time there establishing a church, getting things rolling, getting it off the ground and going. And of course, Paul was a missionary, so he traveled from city to city establishing churches. The new term, the more modern day term for someone as Paul was, it used to be missionaries, now it's called a church planter. They move to different areas and plant churches, and when they get healthy, they move to another area and turn that over to someone else to continue pastoring while he goes and starts another one. So he had been effective in beginning the church at Galatia, and through the course of time, I don't know how long the time had elapsed, it wasn't very long, there were some people who came into the church that began discouraging, began leading people astray, began telling people, no, that's not really wrong. You can do what you want to. Don't worry about that. And what happened was they began drifting away from the faith. They began drifting away from the teachings of the Word. And here's what Paul said in chapter 5 of Galatians, beginning in chapter 7. You were running so well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion did not come from Him who calls you. Today I've titled this sermon, and I want to talk to you about a question. What's got you drifting away? What's got you drifting away? One thing that pastors see is people will come to church. They get saved, they get baptized, they begin following the Lord, they join life groups, they do all of these other things, and they're really involved. They join different teams. They might be on a lawn team, a cleaning team, nursery team, a children's church team, finance team, whatever team there is out there. They get on everything. And before long, you look up and they're not attending anything. And you try to talk to them about it, and the most common response that I get is, oh, we've just been busy. We'll see you Sunday. Okay, good. I'm looking forward to seeing you Sunday. Sunday passes. I didn't see him. The next Sunday passes. I don't see him. So I call him again and I say, hey, I know you're probably still real busy, but I've been missing you at church, and hopefully you can get back in there soon. I'll see you Sunday, Pastor. I'll be there. Sunday comes. You don't see him. The next Sunday comes. I'm not calling them anymore. They've already lied to me twice. So I'm not going to give them a chance to lie to me again. You with me? That's now between them and the Lord. But what I have found is that when people begin drifting away, it's as the Casting Crown song says, it's a slow fade. They begin missing this, or they begin missing this, or they jam something else in the time where they should be at church or at life group or whatever. You fill in the blanks. And before long, other things begin taking priority, and before long, your spiritual life begins suffering deeply. And it happens. And then God has to sometimes send some kind of trauma in your life in order to get you back acknowledging Him again. How many of you have that ever happened to? Say amen. And I'm saying amen too. The Lord gets my attention sometimes. Because even though I'm a pastor and I don't ever miss a service, I don't ever miss a life group, I don't ever miss my cleaning team week or my lawn care team week, I don't ever miss any of that. I don't ever miss the classics because I love the food and I am over 55 and so I go eat. I don't miss it. But there are times that my spirit life begins suffering. And I've begun drifting away in my spirit life. And I'm just going through the motions of what a pastor should be doing instead of really living and basking in the calling of the Lord. It does happen. So, as I think about this subject, I couldn't help but go back to my childhood. We used to, and some of you will know this, if you were born and raised around this area, you'll recognize it. There's a place, if you drive through Pearl River, through Hickory, through the Evans Creek area, and you go up to about Talasheek up Highway 41, you will find a place up there that's called Lock 2. Lock 2, there's a canal, a pretty wide canal. They used to bring barges and such through there, and they have different locks. So, because the river would be at different stages. It is at different stages. So a barge or a boat will go to the lock. They'll open the lock, let them through. Or if it begins flooding upstream, they'll open the lock and let some of the water go. It's a lock system. You got Lock 1, which is right there north of Hickory. And then you've got Lock 2, which is up closer to Talasheek. And we used to go up to Lock 2 on Friday evenings, bring the boat, bring tents, everything. And I'm talking maybe 20 of us would go up there and set up and go camping. And we would have a hoot. We would camp Friday night and Saturday night. And depending on what was going on, I was unsaved at the time. I might be back for church on Sunday morning. I might not. It just depended. So I didn't sleep in a tent. It just wasn't my thing. We had, some of y'all will remember those old tweeted lawn chairs that reclined all the way back. So you could sit up in it during the day, or you could recline it back at night, and it was like a cot. So that's what I slept in, was one of those. And so I came up about 3 feet from the water's edge, and I would set up, and when you could hear a little wind blowing, you might hear a little splash every now and then. It was just relaxing. I used to love sleeping like that, okay? Stars out, mosquitoes biting, whatever. And I would sleep like that. So I went to sleep one night. It was probably about midnight. I went to sleep. Everybody else is in the tents, and I'm down there. Our boats all on the shore, and we would just pull them up because there was no current in there, so you didn't worry about it. We had our watermelons sitting right on the edge of the water to keep them cool, and we had our coolers right there on the beach and everything. I woke up about 6 o'clock in the morning. I'll never forget. I woke up about 6 o'clock, and I was kind of opening my eyes, and I wasn't really focused yet, and I seen things floating out in the river, a.k.a. canal. And finally, I got my eyes open. Our boat had floated down probably 300-400 yards. All of our ice chests were out in the middle. Our watermelons were on the other shore. They were almost like gone. And the only way we could get to any of it was to swim. So the first thing was to swim to the boat. Then we had to start collecting all of our stuff. Our skis had floated off. Everything had. What had happened in the middle of the night, they opened the lock and we didn't know it. They opened the lock slowly so you didn't hear anything. They just opened it, allowed water to drain out, and I went to sleep. I was on the beach about 3 feet from the water's edge. When I woke up, the water was way up here, and I was literally touching water with my back end laying in my chair. And that thought has always occurred to me when people begin drifting away from the Lord. It happened in the middle of the night while I was asleep. I had no clue what was going on. I just woke up to find myself in that water. And our possessions had floated off, and it took us better than an hour to collect everything and get it back on shore. All right? So, when we think about drifting away from the Lord, a lot of times it happens so slowly and so gradually you don't pay attention to what's going on. You just wake up one day and there you are. You have drifted so far, you have returned to the same sin that you once abandoned. You have stopped fellowshipping together with other believers. You have stopped doing anything in the Lord's service, and you find yourself out in the world once again. And it's a slow fade. You don't really realize you're doing it until you get there. So, the question for you today is, what's got you drifting away? I want to, for a few moments today, I want to look at Adam and Eve from the book of Genesis. And I want you to consider this for a few moments. They started off in the most intimate relationship with God that is imaginable. There's nothing that we can even begin to compare to what Adam and Eve had as far as in relationship and fellowship with God. They were in the presence of God every single day, physically walking with Him in the Garden of Eden. Now, there's no closer fellowship than that. They were in the most ideal setting. They were in the garden with the Lord. The word Eden means God's presence, by the way. So they were in the garden of God's presence. And they were fellowshipping with Him every day. We don't know how long they were in that condition. We think about it a lot of times. We say, God created Adam, then the next day He created Eve, then the next day they fell. We have no indication of that. We have no indication of that. We don't know how long they walked with God. And anybody who says they know how long is just strict speculation. I don't put a date on it. I don't put a time stamp on it. I don't know how long. But what I do know is that they were in the presence of God in intimate fellowship. So what changed that? What brought about the change in their life? Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about right here. There has been times in your life that your walk with the Lord was so strong and was so tight and was so close. I mean, you were there. And you felt like every move you made, the Lord was ordering your steps. You felt like everything you did, the Lord was walking there with you. You prayed about everything. He opened the doors that He wanted you to walk through. He closed the doors He didn't want you to walk through. You understand that fellowship. You understand that communion with God. And some of you have drifted way away from that point. Now some of you, it's a real chore to wake up on Sundays and come to church. Now some of you, it's a real chore to go to life group during the week. It's a real chore to do anything for the kingdom of God because you have drifted away and it's been a slow fade. It's been a slow fade. So what changed with Adam and Eve? I'm going to give you a couple of points on this today. Number one, they began doubting God's good intentions. They began doubting God's good intentions. Let me explain this to you. When Satan wanted to break the bond of intimacy between man and God, he didn't try to convince them that God didn't exist. That wouldn't have worked. Now, I will tell you this, Satan does bombard some of you with the thoughts that God doesn't exist. I guarantee you he has nailed you with that a time or two or a million. Oh, there's really no God. You're just worshiping something that's not real. If He was real, you would have seen Him. You would have talked to Him. You would have been able to touch Him. And Satan begins doing that, but he couldn't do that with Adam and Eve because remember, they had walked with God in His presence, personal fellowship, personal relationship, day in and day out. So here's what Satan did. He started by driving a wedge between Eve and God. He began driving that wedge. Now, some of you have family members or friends who are responsible for driving wedges in your life. Some of you have them. Some of you started off running the race very well, following the Lord in everything, and a friend or a family member began giving you a hard time and saying things and throwing things back at you that began driving a wedge between you and God. Let me tell you this long and loud. You will do much better to walk away from a family member and walk away from a friend if they try to drive a wedge between you and your fellowship with the Lord. Walk away from them. I don't care if it is your mama or your daddy or your kids or your brothers or your cousins or your great Aunt Sally. They are nothing compared to God. And you need to grab that right off the bat. You need to understand that. I was thinking yesterday, we have quite a few folks in our church, both male and female, who come to church without their spouses. We have men that attend every single week and their wives will not come to church with them because their wives are bitter or been hurt or whatever. There's a plethora of reasons. We have ladies that come to church every single week without their husbands because either their husbands say they're too busy or they don't believe all that religion stuff, but you can go do your thing, just don't drag me into it. Hats off to you single people who do not prioritize your spouse over your God. I'm just telling you right off the bat, hats off to you. I respect you with everything that I have because your number one priority should be between you and God. Not between you and your spouse, not between you or your parents, and certainly not between you and your kids. I've shared this with you before. I am thankful that I lived in a house we did not have a choice to go to church. When we woke up on Sunday mornings, it wasn't, oh, do you feel like going to church today? Oh, no, you don't? Okay, we'll stay home. Now, that was never a thought. You didn't think about staying home Sunday morning. You didn't think about staying home Sunday night, and you didn't think about staying home on Wednesday night. And you know what? It made me a better man. It made me a better man. It taught me priorities in life. Now, if Satan had come up to Eve and just offered her the fruit, we commonly refer to it as an apple, but we have no indication that it was an apple. It's just the fruit. Whatever that tree was. It could have been a banana tree. Who knows? Okay? Could have been a big tomato plant. Some of you are saying that's a vegetable. Oh, no, it's not. It's a fruit. Okay? In order for Satan to get her to try that fruit, that forbidden fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he had to convince her that something was wrong, that God had somehow messed up. So that brings us to number 2. In order to get her to participate in his scheme, Satan's scheme, he had to convince her and he had to try to make her feel that God had somehow restricted her. Now, I'm going to tell you this. One of the worst things you can do to a human is to put him on restriction. Are you with me? Listen, when I was a kid, I pretty well lived on restriction, but, you know, it is what it is. I deserved everything I got. But the truth is, I would much rather have taken a whipping from a belt than I would have been to been put on restriction. And that's the truth. Because I can get a whipping with a belt, I'm over it in 5 minutes. I might be a little bit painful for 30 minutes, but, you know, then I'm past it. But restriction, I have to sit there hour after hour after hour. And all my friends are playing outside, and I want to be outside. That was worse to me than whipping me. So my parents figured that out, so they did both. They tore me up, then put me in timeout, you know. And timeout wasn't 5 minutes with my mom and dad. Timeout was like 3 weeks. And I'm not exaggerating on that one. They got their point across with me, but it made me a better man. All right? But when Satan begins making us feel like we are restricted, that's the very thing we'll run to every single time. Why? Because that's our human nature. That's our human nature. Satan got Eve to question whether God had her best intentions in mind when God told them not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Satan convinced Eve that she was missing out on something. God didn't have good intentions for you, Eve. He's restricting you. And He knows that when you eat that, your eyes are going to be opened and you're going to be like Him. See, He began making her feel like she was missing something. The best way to destroy a relationship is to drive a wedge in it. Some of you understand that because you've had friendships that have ended because a wedge was driven. Some of you have had marriages that were ended because a wedge was driven in it. Okay? This is reality. This is as real as it can possibly get. Satan breaks our trust in God by getting us to interpret His way, His character, everything about Him improperly. You see, a lot of people believe that God is this big celestial killjoy sitting on a throne up in heaven just waiting to make our lives miserable. That's how some people view God. Literally, and I'm not kidding you. As a pastor, I've heard it all. Eve began to believe Satan's interpretation of God. She was slowly drifting away, and you know why? Because she was listening to the wrong person. Listening to the wrong person. Some of you in here today, I don't know why God sent this message. He grabbed my attention first with it, and then He told me to give it to you. But it had to start in me. Some of you are drifting away from God because you're listening to the wrong people. You need to learn the art of walking away. Are you with me? I believe probably everybody in this building has people who are speaking negatively into your life. And if that's the case, you need to erase those people from your fellowship, because they will eventually drag you away from God. And that's one of the worst things that can happen to you. By the time Adam and Eve abandoned God, they were convinced that there were all of these benefits that I was going to gain if I just listen to Satan and eat of that fruit, and then my eyes will be open and I'll know everything like God knows. There's so many benefits to me going against God's will. By the time they were convinced of that, things had changed drastically in their lives. Things had changed drastically. God, who had given them everything, was now viewed as stingy and restrictive. That's how they viewed God. He's stingy and restrictive. Why would God tell me I can't do that? See, that's what some people whisper into your ears. Why would God tell me I can't do that? God, who had given them all things, is now keeping something from them that's going to bring great pleasure and a lot of satisfaction in their life. I've known men that were convinced that if they just had this other woman, their lives would be full and they would be perfectly happy the rest of their lives. And they enter into an adulterous affair with another woman. They end up leaving their wife. And a year down the road, they're divorcing or moving away from the person that they ran off from their wife to go with. Because if you're trying to find happiness in a person, you will never, ever find happiness or contentment in a person. It will never happen. If you want to be a better, if you want a better wife, you be a better husband. Let me say that again. I'm preaching to guys here, but this thing goes the opposite way too, ladies. If you want a better wife or if you want a better husband, then be a better wife or a better husband. Because trust me when I tell you, satisfaction will not be found in the arms of another person for very long. It won't. Satan is lying to you, convincing you that you are restricted, and God is trying to kill your joy. Oh no. Look, you're looking at a person I will die on this hill. This is a hill I will go to battle on, and I will die on this hill. Listen to me long and listen to me loud. You choose who you love. You choose who you love. Now, some of you are probably disagreeing with me right now. Let me give you a prime example. Susan and I adopted 4 babies from the state of Florida. One we adopted at 5 years old. 2 years later, we adopted a 5-month-old, a 20-month-old, and a 3-year-old. We chose to love them, and I'm going to tell you, they are mine. They are mine. I chose to love them. You choose who you love. You choose who you love. That person you're married to right now, you can choose to love them. But you have to shut the lies out of your mind that Satan's putting there. Now, some of you don't like what I'm preaching right now. Get over it. Because it's the truth from the Word of God. This is the truth. You have to turn the voices off that are telling you that you can be happy elsewhere. Some of you are convinced of Satan's lies. just exactly like Adam and Eve became. You see, Eve became convinced. Eve went to Adam and convinced her husband of Satan's lie. Here's what Genesis chapter 3, verse 2 through 6 says. The woman said to the serpent, that would be Eve, saying to Satan, who was appearing in the form of a snake, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat. But from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it, or you will die. The serpent said to the woman, you surely will not die. For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took from its fruit and ate. And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. All right? So, did God lie at any point during that? Absolutely not. God told him, you don't eat of it or you will die. Did Adam and Eve die? They absolutely positively did. Not that moment. Not that moment. They died sometime later. But they certainly died. Satan twisted things around to make it look good, to make it sound good. And we have to be very careful that we don't allow that in our lives. Some of you are battling with alcohol abuse in this building. Some of you are battling with drug abuse in this building. And I'm going to tell you, I've been there on the alcohol end. Man, it calls you by name. It begins calling out to you. It begins making you think you cannot live without it. Now, for those of you who know me, I've been accused of being an abstinence individual. I am a 100% total abstainer, and I believe all God's people should 100% abstain from alcohol. Period, across the board. And I've been accused that the only reason I'm like that is because I used to have a problem with it. Let me assure you, that's not the reason that I feel like that. I feel like that because I believe that's what the Word of God says, and it's consistent with His teaching. You might not like that either. But Satan sure packages it up and makes it look good. And we're convinced that we can't have fun without it. I hadn't had a drink in over 35 years, and I'm telling you, I have fun every single day. Loads of fun. Hanging out with God's people. It's wonderful. Some of you that have battled drug abuse, some of you may still be battling drug abuse. Let me tell you something. You can live without it. Satan's just got you so bound by it and convinced that you can't live by it. Because when you stay off of it for a little while, you begin shaking, you begin having all these emotions, you begin freaking out and all this and that. Trust me, if you get past that, you're done. You're done. About 3 or 4 or 5 days of the detox situation in your life, then you have passed it up. Don't return to it. Amen? That's the way it is. Because Satan is constantly lying, telling you, you need this. You need this. People get themselves in financial trouble because they listen to Satan telling them, oh, you need this new thing. You need this. You need this. You need that iPhone 13 when your iPhone 10 is still perfectly good. Oh, you need that. You get my point? Satan continues to lie to us all the time, telling us things, and slowly drifting away because we are not listening to the voice of God. We are listening to the voice of the evil one. Listen to what Jesus said about Satan in John chapter 8. I love this passage here. You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of it. You notice we put it in red letters, right? That's because that's the words of Jesus. And we're going to portray the words of Jesus in red letters so you know it's him talking and not me. Here's some common lies that Satan tells us, and see if you identify with any of them. Lie number 1, God has been good to others, but not as good to me. He has denied me some things I really deserve. That's what he'll tell you. Oh, you deserve better than that? God has denied me of things I really deserve. Number 2, God is somehow to blame for all of the bad things in my life. God is somehow to blame. Look, this is something that I had to come to grips with years and years ago. God is not to blame for all the problems in my life. I am. I make dumb choices, I do dumb things, and all I'm doing is reaping the consequences of my dumb decisions. I didn't pray to God and ask Him what He thought before I entered into this dumb decision. I just jumped off into it. And then I find myself in trouble, and I want to blame it on God. What's up with that? That's a lie straight from the pits of hell. Lie number 3, I've been good, but God has not been treating me fairly. Listen to me long and loud. You don't want God treating you fairly. You with me? You want God treating you with grace, not with fairness, because fairness will land you in hell. Because there is none righteous, no, not one, according to the Bible. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Trust me, you don't want fairness from God. Lie number 4, God is demanding and restrictive and wants to be a killjoy in my life. I was talking with someone the other day. I'm going back to this alcohol thing for a moment. And that's not the message. It's just talking about me personally. It is so freeing to me to know that I have absolutely positively lived without it for over 35 years. That's freeing to me. I don't need it. I don't have to have it in my body, and I don't need some other substance altering my chemical makeup in any form or fashion so that I can have fun, because I'm smart enough to have fun on my own. I don't need something to change my personality into a fun. If I don't like who I am, I just simply change who I am. I don't need something to do that for me. We were talking about that the other night, I think before Life Group, we were talking about how freeing it is not to have to live under the bounds of that any longer. I want you to think with me just for a moment about King David. I want you to think about how he drifted away from God. Man, here is a man that grew up seeing God and God's power in ways we can't even imagine. David grew up seeing the deliverance of God, seeing the power of God, seeing the ways of God. David grew up acknowledging God. David was made the king over all of Israel. And probably one of the greatest kings that ever lived. Him or his son Solomon, most of them would tell you. But David, arguably the greatest king that Israel ever had, grew up loving God. Matter of fact, the Bible says David was a man after God's own heart. God loved David, man. He anointed him as a child to be the king. And God walked with David. But there was a day David felt he was missing something. It didn't matter that he had a wife. Or if you go back and read it accurately, he probably had way more than one wife. Because that was legal and moral and everything during that time frame. Most of us men can't handle more than one now, so that's why God restricted it. But back then they did. So it didn't matter that he had a whole harem here with him. He went out on his porch and looked down the ravine, and there was a beautiful woman named Bathsheba down there taking a bath. And instead of David going, "Oh, no, I'm going to go find contentment and satisfaction in what I already have in the house in here." Oh, no. He felt like he was missing out on something. Satan sold him a bad bill of goods. Tell him, "Oh, David, Yeah, you got 10 of them in the house, but ain't none of them as fine as that. And he just stood there staring until everything in him released. All the testosterone and everything else, endorphins and you name, everything in him turned loose. And he sent for this woman named Bathsheba to come to the king's palace. Long story short, he had sexual relations with her. Didn't matter he was married. Didn't matter that she was married to a man named Uriah, who was a commander in David's army out in the battlefield. Didn't make any difference because Satan sold him that lie. And he wasn't listening to anything at that point. Nothing. He wanted what he wanted. And he got what he wanted. Bathsheba became pregnant. David all of a sudden realized, oh boy, people are going to know something because her husband has been out in the battlefield for months now. He hadn't been home. So if she's pregnant, it's not Uriah's baby. That was her husband's name. So David conjured up this plan. And he said, send Uriah home. He's going to go over and sleep with his wife. And then he'll go back to the battle and he'll think the baby's his. We're all good. We're all covered. Check that one off. So he sent for Uriah. Uriah came home. Uriah was a man of honor. And he said, I will not go and stay in the house with my wife. I will not sleep with her while my brothers are out in the army, in the battlefield, being slaughtered. So I'm just going to sleep right here on the king's porch all night long. Tomorrow I'm going back to the battlefield. Since the king made me come home, I'm just going to sleep at his house. Yeah, David was in a mess because now everybody knew Uriah didn't go home. David sent him back to the battlefield with a letter. And he said, do not open this letter. I'm sealing it with the king's stamp. Take it to the commander that's in the field, the man right above you. Take that letter to him, and don't you dare read it before you get there. Uriah, a man of honor, took the letter to the commander and said, this is straight from King David. The commander opened the letter, and here's what David wrote. I want you to put Uriah right on the front lines. When the battle gets the most intense, when people are dying left and right, I want you to put Uriah right up front, and then you command the army to pull back away from him. You get what's going on? David wanted Uriah dead because he couldn't tell his story then. And that's exactly what happened. Uriah died. David's going, check that, got it covered. Till a man named Nathan went to the king's house. Nathan was a prophet. And I'm going to spare you all the details there. It's a great story. Go and read it. Nathan went into the king's palace and put his finger in David's face and said, you are the man. You're the one who committed murder. You're the one that got that woman pregnant. God revealed it to him. David's life was never the same. His children turned against him. One of his children tried to kill him. One of his children raped his sister. Another brother killed that brother. David's family was in shambles. Why? Because David drifted away. It all began with a look at a naked woman that he couldn't turn around and walk away from. He had to have her. You get my point? That drifting away was slow. Now, in David's case, it was pretty fast. But he drifted away nonetheless. What about Moses? Moses was a man who knew the power of God. For heaven's sake, Moses was out running from the Egyptians because he done killed one of their soldiers. And he ends up on a mountain tending sheep, and God shows up in the form of a burning bush. And God tells Moses, take off your shoes because you're on holy ground and me and you going to have a conversation. And God told Moses what he wanted him to do. Moses went to do what God wanted him to do after some hesitancy. Moses seen all the plagues that God brought on Egypt. Moses saw God part the Red Sea and they walked across. Moses saw God feed them with manna, just bread substance that floated out of heaven. Moses saw God feed them with quail when they needed meat. And then they got thirsty and God told Moses, he said, I want you to go and just take your staff and stretch it forth over this rock. And I'm going to make water pour out of that rock. Moses was drifting away because the people had been complaining, grumbling against Moses, and giving Moses a hard time because they were out in the desert. We'd do better to go back to Egypt to become slaves. And Moses was getting frustrated. So when God told him to stretch out his staff, Moses took his staff and hit the rock really hard. And God said, okay, buddy, your anger and your frustration has just cost you more than you would ever imagine. And Moses was not allowed to go into the promised land because of that one act. Now, God did still, in fact, bring water out of that rock because God was going to provide for His people. But Moses suffered because he drifted away out of anger and frustration. What about Peter? Here's the disciple who walked with Jesus for a little over 3 years. He saw all the miracles. He saw all of these things happen. And here's Peter the night Jesus was arrested, standing around the camp of sinners, standing around the camp of people who were pagans. Let's just say that. Unbelievers. He's warming himself by the fire, and one of them says, hey, aren't you one of those Jesus men? Peter said, I don't know who you're talking about. This is the night Jesus was arrested, the night before His crucifixion. Peter's like, I don't know that man. Another one said, no, I'm pretty sure that was you. Peter's getting angry, and he goes, no, it wasn't me. And a third one said, I am pretty sure you are the man that was with Jesus. And Peter, I'm telling you, blankety blank, 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 I don't know the man. He started cursing and swearing that he did not know Jesus. Now what happened to Peter? He drifted away. Out of fear, out of anxiety, he drifted away from God. Let me tell you something, folks. There's a lot of reasons that people drift away from God. What's your reason? Why are you drifting away? If I haven't touched on it today, maybe you need to give me another point next time I decide to use something on this. But I'm pretty sure I probably have touched on it. There's no doubt, I wrote this week, I want to give it to you. There's no doubt that some of you here today have drifted away from the Lord. Maybe because of stress, anxiety, laziness, lack of priority, or busyness. Some have drifted away because you just don't want somebody else telling you that what you're doing is wrong. Some may even be doubting God's goodness or His existence. Either way, you're drifting. You're drifting. And let me assure you of this. It's an old saying, it's kind of cliche, but I want to give it to you. Sin will take you farther than you want to go. Sin will keep you longer than you want to stay. And sin will cost you more than you want to pay. You're drifting. And trust me, you're going to wake up. And you may wake up soon enough to get back to normal without any real consequences. But most of you will not. Most of you will suffer consequences the rest of your life because of your drifting away from God. There's only one path back. And I'm going to give you this in closing. There's one path back. James chapter 4, verse 7 and the first part of verse 8. James chapter 4. Submit therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. There are preachers on TV that just tell you, you need to resist the devil. You need to resist the devil. You need to resist. Your grandmother might have told you, you need to resist that old devil. Your mama might have told you, you need to resist that old devil. Oh no, that's not scriptural. Because unless you are submitting to God first, the devil's laughing at you when you begin resisting him. You have to submit to God first. You have to put yourself in right relationship with God first. And then begin resisting the devil. Look, if you've had enough of the world's lies, if you've tried everything in your life to find peace and contentment, if your struggles become more than you can bear and you just cannot carry this load any longer, it's time to give it to Jesus. Jesus said, "Come to me, all ye are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And I'm going to tell you, rest you cannot imagine when you're in right fellowship with the Lord. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. He's waiting with open arms right now. I love what David said when David woke up and realized he was in a mess after all that sin, the adultery, the murder. And he buried that child shortly after it was born of his and Bathsheba. He went through a mess. And he woke up one day and realized what he had done. And his prayer was something like this: Lord, cleanse me from my unrighteousness. Wash me, and I will be clean. Lord, forgive me. And this is the most profound statement he made. Lord, restore unto me the joy of your salvation. Restore unto me the joy of your salvation. David didn't claim salvation to be his own. I've heard people say, I just need the Lord to restore the joy of my salvation. Uh-oh, now you're in trouble already. Because it's not your salvation. It was a gift given to you from the Lord. It's His. He's the one who paid the price. He's the owner. He's the grantor of salvation. And David said, Lord, restore unto me the joy of your salvation. You know what? God did that, but his life was never the same. He had consequences to pay. See, sometimes people want to go off and do their own thing and then come back to God thinking He's going to erase all those consequences. Oh, no. No. In the flesh, you're going to deal with what you've chosen to do. But you can have peace inside while you're going through the storm. What's your decision today?